Alright, hello everyone. Today I want to do something a little bit different from my normal stuff. Besides all the tractors and engines, something else I'm really into is railroading, and particularly model railroading. I do some stuff in HO and O scale. So today I want to talk about this. This is probably one of the rarest things that I own overall. And it is an HO scale Varney Yellowstone Locomotive. So what is Varney? Or what was Varney? Varney was one of the really early manufacturers of HO scale model trains. The company goes back to around 1936. It was founded by Mr. Gordon Varney. And their models, while rather simple compared to today's standards, really provided some impressively accurate models of actual trains back in the day. And they were produced while the real ones were still out running the rails, which is also really pretty neat. Something I do love about stuff from this era. They produced all kinds of locomotives and rolling stock, spanning from a little 040 switcher locomotive all the way up to stuff like this Yellowstone, as well as a little bit into O scale with a 460 10-wheeler locomotive, as well as a 462 Pacific. Those are very unique models and also somewhat rare. Gordon Varney sold the company in 1960, and it became part of Lifelike model trains, which unfortunately have a reputation of not being a very good model train. It's kind of a shame how the name fell after the company was sold. So the Varney Yellowstone in particular, this model, it was first produced in 1939, and it was sold in its production run up until probably 1947 or so, I think. Maybe 48. I'm not entirely sure. It was sold in 3 different variations. You could either buy a complete locomotive, which I would assume hardly ever happened. You could buy a kit. It was the complete thing, but you had to put it together yourself. Or, and most common, though still not very well sold, you could buy just the brass casting of the boiler, or, well, just the casting of the boiler. And the casting of the boiler was offered in 3 different materials. Supposedly, the very start of the run in 39, they were produced in cast bronze. And they were also produced in cast aluminum, and what this one is, cast brass. Now, this particular model, it was sold to me as pre-war, which it could be. I've found sources which state that the brass variant wasn't sold until 46, but other sources also say that the brass was offered as early as 1939, so I'm not 100% sure on that. Information on these is pretty limited, as they're pretty rare, and seems like not a lot of people know all that much about them. But they were sold using what is 280 consolidation locomotive frames, and that is technically what's underneath this, although looking at it, I do have to wonder if this one was sold as a kit, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. They could have used a few different motors. This particular one has the V2 Super motor, which is offered by Varney, and they are really quite impressive motors for the day. They are 7-pole, incredibly smooth, and they have an enclosed casing around them, as well as ball bearings that it spins on. They're very high-end motors for the day. As you can see, there's only one on the rear set of drivers. The front set is just a dummy. I have seen or heard of examples of these that have been built with dual motors, which is probably better, as having only one under it means that these are kind of underpowered for what they are. But it's still pretty neat nonetheless. Overall, it's a pretty impressive model, especially for the era. Varney liked to encourage customization with stuff like this, so there's probably no two that are exactly identical, besides ones that are left unbuilt. Some people have even used specific chassis on these to turn them into 2664 or 4662, 4664, etc. I don't know exactly what, but I've seen a few different wheel configurations that can be made with these, which are pretty neat, and that is what Gordon Varney wanted to encourage, was customization. So what's up with this particular Yellowstone? I bought this on eBay a month or two ago. I paid quite a lot for it, but I'm still really happy with it, and I don't regret the purchase. The Varney Yellowstone was one of my dream locomotives, and something I thought I'd never be able to get my hands on, but this listing came up, and I decided I was not going to let anyone else win it. And so here it is. It was missing a fair bit of parts when I first purchased it, but all of the parts that were missing were more common, just small detail parts that were more easily obtainable, so I was not worried about it. It already had the whole main chassis and everything, as well as all the stuff up front here, which would have been more difficult to get. What it was missing was both sets of valve gear and the main connecting rods and all that for the sets of drivers. Did not have wheels and trailing truck. It was missing all of the really small detail parts. No handrails. It had some handrail posts, but not all of them. No air compressors, or the bell, or the whistles, or the generator, safety valves, stuff like that. It also did not have a tender. So I purchased all of these parts to get it back to complete state, and I have to shout out to a guy on a website called Bonanza, which is basically an eBay alternative website for people to sell stuff, like a marketplace. His page is called Old Model Train Relics. He was really nice. He was really helpful with talking to me to get the parts that I needed to get this back together. So if you need old Varney model train parts, or if you need parts for some other stuff, or maybe even you want to look for some old locomotives, do check him out. He's got all kinds of stuff listed right now. But so yeah, I purchased all these parts, minus a few things I won in a random eBay lot. And the handrails is just regular handrail wire that I bought new from a hobby place. So I put together all the valve gear and stuff of that sort. You see there's a power reverse hiding up under there. According to the original Varney sales brochures, that is actually the correct location for it. Same with the 4 safety valves up here. Those are listed in the original Varney advertising for this model. The tender is obviously not correct. This is a pre-war Varney wooden tender, Pennsylvania 6039. For the time being, this is a Pennsylvania Yellowstone. The correct tender is brass. I am looking for one, and I will find one eventually to really get this to be a complete prototypical-ish Yellowstone. But for the time being, it's good enough. Details on the front here. Shadows are not being kind to me. The air compressors are not quite correct. Those 2 little canisters that hang off the side of them on the actual locomotive would run up to the top and basically hang on either side of the bell, but I cannot find parts like that, and most of the other Yellowstone examples I can see online, those are just chopped off entirely, but I did not want to cut them off, so I just left them as they were. You've also got the bell here. That is a specific part for hanging on the front like that. And there's also those little markers on either side, which if I turn on my light here, you can see they got little green jewels inside of them. And I like to find a set of slightly better ones because those aren't in the best of shape, but they look alright for now. I also put together a little handrail up here. That looks pretty decent. It's not quite correct because that would have had like stuff for an auto uncoupler, although I don't have a coupling in here right now, so that doesn't really matter. And I also go around to the back here between the locomotive and tender, put together those little handrails as well. So this turned out pretty decent. You can see back here is the generator, and then 2 turned brass whistles, which may not be prototypical, but there are a couple holes drilled up here, and I thought dual whistles would look cool, so it has dual whistles now. All of the soldering work on the sides of it was done before I bought it. Seems to be missing a piece on here that it has on the other side. You can see there's 4 on that side. I may try and replicate that. I may not. Not entirely sure. I also added these tanks under here just to give a little more detail. The original ones seem to have a lot of small wires running down the sides. I do not have that, nor do I think I'll really find anywhere to obtain that, so I think it looks just fine without. I'm happy with it as it is. Works, and some improvements I might want to make with this model are, obviously I might try to fix that, like I just said. Finding a new set of those. There are different types of wheels. You can see each of these wheel sets just on this side. That wheel that the main crank's attached to is the different kind with the straight spokes. That is how it was built. I don't know if I can find replacements. I might, but if not, it doesn't concern me because I don't mind leaving it as it is. I'd like to find some different valve guides for this front set because you can see they're a little different. There's a few things that are mismatched between these 2 sets with the valve gear and whatnot, but I'm not all that concerned about that. It doesn't really matter to me. The motor in it needs either replaced or I need to at least try and re-magnetize the magnet in it because it doesn't seem to be all that powerful anymore, unfortunately, and the added drag of the valve gear that I may have made a little tight by mistake doesn't help it any. It doesn't seem to want to run very well, but for now I'm not too concerned. This model will only run on really wide. This track that it's on right now is a 22-inch radius track. And they were designed to be able to run on tighter curves, but to do that you need some blind drivers. And as you can see looking in here, I do not have any blind drivers on either set of wheels. So even on this curve, you can see the amount of overhang, but it does sit correctly on the curve for the most part, so that is good. This has full suspension. I don't know if you can see looking in there or not, but each axle is being held up by a tiny piece of wire, and there's one on each side. That wire is sprung, and that adds a suspension to all of the wheels and the axles. So that's really neat. I like that ingenuity for the 1940s. But yeah, that is pretty much the Varney Yellowstone, or the one that I've got. I'm not going to paint it. I like this raw brass look, little die-cast accessories. I think they look really neat, just as they are. When I get a brass tender for it, it's not going to be painted either. But yeah, try and get a look at the other side here as best as I can. I'm very happy with how it turned out with all of the detailing. It looks really nice for what it is. None of these handrail posts are quite lined up correctly or spaced right or anything, but that's just how they were drilled back when someone was first working on this, so that's how they are going to stay. There's a few things on this model that I like that. They're strange and unique, but just gonna leave them as they are. Well, if you like old Varney HO scale locomotives, if you like model railroading, or if you like railroading in general, be sure to subscribe. I've got plans for more railroad stuff in the future, as well as lots more Varney locomotives I can make videos on. So, if you like that stuff, subscribe and stay tuned for that. If you like the old Varney Yellowstone in particular, do leave a like. I sure do like it. It's definitely one of my favorite things that I've ever owned, and again, probably one of the rarest things that I own. That's gonna about do it for this one, so I'll see you all in the next video, and as always, thank you for watching.